This program is made possible by the New York law firm of Zalman and Storman, who specialize in the field of personal injury law. Welcome to Law Line with your host, Alan Schnorman. Mr. Schnorman is a distinguished trial attorney, author, and lecturer. Each week, Law Line will bring you the most knowledgeable experts in the field of law today. And now we introduce our guest and our host, Alan Schnorman.
Welcome to Law Line. The Crown Heights riots in the summer of 1991 was likened to a pogrom by the members of the Jewish community. The slaying of Hasidic scholar Yanko Rosenbaum and the attacks on the Jews in the Crown Heights community without the police taking cohesive action to protect them has resulted in an unprecedented lawsuit against the mayor, the police commissioner, and the city of New York. Today we'll look at that case with Franklin Snitow, the attorney representing the plaintiffs from Crown Heights, and Thomas Bergdahl, assistant corporation counsel who represents the mayor, the police commissioner, and the city of New York. Hello, Franklin. Hello, Tom.
Good afternoon.
Franklin, tell me, what is this major lawsuit about?
What the lawsuit is about is an attempt by the Jews of Crown Heights, as a part of a class action, to redress the injuries that they received and to be assured that the city will not engage in the type of conduct that you just described.
But what are you asking for? Are you asking for money?
We're asking for money damages and injunctive relief.
And Tom, what's your defense? You represent the city, the mayor, and the police commissioner. What do you say?
Well, I think it's first important to get clear exactly what's being alleged. What Mr. Snitow's clients are alleging is that the mayor and police commissioner gave express orders for racially discriminatory reasons to withhold police protection.
I mean, they told the police, do not do anything.
That's what's alleged.
Let the riots continue.
That's what's alleged.
Let the people be injured. Let the property be damaged.
That's what's alleged, and I have to say that to give our response is we deny it. That didn't happen. There's been a state commission that's investigated that says that didn't happen.
No, wait. The state commission doesn't say that. What the state commission says is they could find no evidence, but they didn't have the right to subpoena. They didn't put anybody under oath. We're finding quite a different set of facts.
Franklin, you just opposed the mayor of the city of New York, Mayor Dinkins. Well, what did you find out in that deposition?
What we found out is, as opposed to the impression that they tried to give at the outset, that this was just some band of roving youths who just got a little out of control and there was a little sporadic violence, we found out that the mayor made it quite clear, that this was the worst act of discrimination, of violence perpetrated by one ethnic group against another in the history of the city. That's what we found out, and the Girgenti report corroborates that. What we say is, you have to remember, when we started this lawsuit, the impression that was given, again, was sporadic violence, no big problem. The Girgenti report demonstrated, and Mr. Girgenti has said in subsequent quotes, made it very clear that this was the worst violence, and he can't understand why the riot plan that was in effect at that time was not utilized. And you know what? The mayor has said he was aware of that as of Wednesday night.
Tom, you were sitting to the right of the mayor during the deposition. Was that your interpretation of the testimony?
No, clearly it wasn't my interpretation of the testimony. There's never been any impression that's been given by the city that this was no big deal. And whenever you say it's the worst, ethnic violence, maybe it is. I can't think of another instance where you've had one ethnic group really engaged directly attacking another, and in that respect it is the worst. But to say that, let's not blow this out of proportion. I mean, this is not the Los Angeles riots. It's not South Central Los Angeles. It's not even Chicago after the Bulls wins. It's a terrible circumstance. It's a terrible situation. What the city has said is, yes, indeed, the police responded to that. Maybe, in hindsight, they didn't do good enough.
But frankly,
maybe we should have done better. But certainly there were no orders, which is what Mr. Snitow has always alleged, that say, let's hold back the cops.
Chief Gallagher is alleged in the Girgenti report, in numerous places, to have said there was a policy of restraint. The mayor has basically admitted in various places that he was aware of a policy of restraint. What does that mean? This was not something that happened. This is not something that happened in 5 minutes, and he's just accountable in some corporate fashion. He was debriefed on the very first night. The affidavits that you put into the court when it denied your motions to dismiss and your motion for summary judgment, the court denied those. You put in affidavits that never once mentioned any anti-Semitic acts, never mentioned who were the perpetrators, who were the victims. And let me just tell you one thing. The lawsuit's not about being divisive. The lawsuit's not about comparing pain. It's about comparing treatment. And it's an attempt for people to recognize that discrimination is discrimination even when the victims aren't politically correct.
Well, but I have to respond to that a little bit. What the lawsuit is about is still, and Frank hasn't denied it, it's about an allegation that the mayor and police commissioner said, for racially discriminatory reasons, we're not going to provide
Can I
police
ask you a
protection.
question?
That's simply not
I have a
true.
question, if I may.
That's what it's
Let's
about.
assume it's proved that it wasn't racially motivated, but the mayor did say, use restraint, do not do this, do not do this, do not do this, and people were injured because of that. Are you responsible then?
No. As a matter of law, no. Now, that didn't happen.
That's-
Why are we responsible as a matter of law? In my opinion, absolutely.
That's not correct. That's
What is
not
correct?
correct.
What
We
is
don't have
correct?
to show.
What
You
is
see, what
correct?
they're trying to say is we have to show that the mayor dislikes Jewish people, that he's an anti-Semite. That is intended to deflect the public from the real question. The real question is whether racially motivated decisions were made, whether, in fact, discrimination. You may love women, but if you decide to not promote women because you have great rational reasons that you believe are totally legitimate, the courts and the law has said that's discrimination. If you make a decision for whatever basis, something the city has never said, the city's never said either, one, it was too little or too late. In the papers that they submitted to Judge Radji, they said their response was adequate, was more than adequate, never said it was too little, too late. That's what the apologists try to say.
Franklin, do you have to prove that the mayor intentionally restrained the police and not negligently restrained the police?
Negligence is only one of our causes of action under this situation. Under the civil rights law, we have obligations to demonstrate that he knew and that there was racial decisions made.
Knowingly decision
which in essence
was racially motivated.
Which created a
Are you saying that you think it's anti-Semitic?
No, that's not what's being said, and that's what the mayor would like you to have you to believe, to deflect from what actually occurred. You have to realize, Alan, that there was 4 days of violence, that clearly he was on the spot from the beginning, that when we asked him at the depositions what were the tactical errors he talked about in November 1992, that he mentioned, he said there were tactical errors made by the police. We asked him what they were. I don't remember. I can't tell you. You want to hear a funny story? He said, I'm the kind of guy that doesn't remember what happened in November 7th, 1941, the day Pearl Harbor.
Not in response
He
to that
said
question.
he said he doesn't remember.
That.
He doesn't remember what happened. You know what we found? A Newsday article where he recalled his recollections of what occurred.
Tom, how do you answer all these accusations?
No, I'm not sure what Frank is referring to on the last point there. But his basic complaint, and Frank has made this on several prior occasions, is that we put in affidavits from the police commanders that said, yeah, we responded a lot. The first night we immediately deployed 300 some odd cops. The next day we deployed 1,000 cops. The next day we deployed 1,400 cops. And on each and every situation, we thought we had brought the situation under control. Now,
and that we had a policy, we had a policy to arrest and aggressively prosecute. But you know what the Girgenti report found out? That the Jews weren't so hysterical, that there was a policy of restraint.
Tom? Yes, of course. Go right ahead,
my
please.
statement
Go right
first.
ahead.
That is the same statement that the Girgenti Commission found, that we've always maintained.
Now, that's Governor Cuomo's commission. He appointed
Yes,
that?
yeah.
Right.
So that comes out of the governor's
police
office.
commanders were there on the scene. They said, we directed this response. We believed that it was adequate. That's what we told the mayor, that we thought that our response was adequate. Now, it came a point, well, you know, on Wednesday night, there came a point later when, in hindsight, when the police department as well as the mayor determined they needed to do something else. And they did something else. They responded. That doesn't mean that the city somehow thought this was a picnic that was going on, that it wasn't a tense and very bad situation. That's the reason we had 1,400 cops
So
out
you're
there.
saying you did everything you had to do under the circumstances?
In hindsight, we could have done a heck of a lot better.
Or you could have.
But
What could you have done in hindsight?
I don't know. I'm not a police commander.
You put more police officers on the scene?
They clearly changed their tactical plan on Thursday. That's something
No,
we're going
no,
to
they-
explore in this lawsuit.
No, they didn't. They really did. They had that plan in effect. That's what Mr. Girgenti says. The riot plan was in effect way before the Crown Heights incident ever happened in August of 1991. And you know what else has been revealed? not under oath again, but what's been revealed is that there are at least 10 pages dedicated in the Girgenti report to all of the city officials who knew and should have, could have, would have told the mayor, as well as people who talked directly to the mayor, that the police were not reacting.
If you're successful in the lawsuit, how much money do you want the city to pay?
We have to form our class. There's probably millions of dollars of damages, but
1 million, 2 million?
more than that. But the reality is
10 million? How much are you asking
Those are
for?
numbers. Those are numbers that we have to determine from people who are actually injured. This lawsuit is about civil rights. It really transcends simply money. It transcends money because it goes to the question of basic police protection in view of violence. If you say that this was right, if you allow this kind of thing to occur, then let me ask you, in Bayside, Queens, where there's a small minority community, can a bunch of Jewish people or can a bunch of white people come running into that neighborhood, and in order not to upset the rest of the community, you allow a little venting of rage? That's discrimination. That's what happened in Crown Heights. That's what occurred. And that's what can't be admitted because it's politically incorrect to admit it at this time.
Well, you heard that. Franklin is saying
Well,
there is allowing a venting of rage for political purposes?
I mean, clearly we deny that. I mean, that is something that no one would accept at any time for any reason.
How do you get around,
And it has
Howard,
nothing
how
to
do
do
you
with
get
being
around-
politically correct. It has to do with that is a most
How do you get
venal-
around-
That is intentional discrimination. That's, the sheriff allowing the Ku Klux Klan to ride uninhibited. That's what did not happen.
May I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
How do you get around the statements that as early as Tuesday night, Monday morning, Monday night, high city officials were informed, the people who are the direct lieutenants to the mayor were informed that the police were not reacting, and that the Girgenti report found 3 of the major lieutenants to the mayor unworthy of belief with regard to their statements?
I'm actually going to try and avoid, Frank, and I'm going to try and avoid Alan arguing my case now while we're in the midst of discovery. What Frank knows, because he's deposed these witnesses, is that they deny that that's the case.
They don't deny it at all. 2 said they don't remember, 1 denied it, and the people who say they reported it under oath said that they did. And in fact, one official said that contrary to what he told the Girgenti people, is that he was in a police car Tuesday night, and the police told him directly they had been in the field, and the bosses were holding them back. He claims that when he spoke to the mayor at 6 o'clock in the morning, he forgot to tell him that.
Franklin, you commenced...
And that's of absolutely no moment whatsoever.
Of course it is.
Oh, come on. We're talking about a young assistant to the mayor who says 2 cops told me this, and yes, indeed, that was late Tuesday night, and on Wednesday
at 6 in the morning,
the tactical plan changed. Now, Frank somehow seems to imply that people are holding back, that they're hiding something. That's not the case.
Can I ask you a question, Tom?
Evidence to that.
Can I ask you a question? 3 o'clock in the morning, a confession was taken from Limerick Nelson that said he joined a group of people saying, "Get the Jews, kill the Jews," and that resulted in the stabbing of Yankel Rosenbaum. That was at 3 o'clock in the morning. At 12 o'clock in the afternoon, the mayor of the city of New York and his police commissioner were referring to the Australian, and saying they didn't know whether it was an act of retaliation or robbery. That's the same police commissioner who the mayor of the city of New York endorsed as an appropriate drug czar. Are you going to tell me that the mayor of the city of New York did not know at noon what his police department knew at 3 o'clock in the morning? That was a racially motivated attack?
I tell you what I'm going to let you do is I'm going to let you ask the mayor that question. I'm going to let you ask the former police commissioner.
I already have, and he said...
Commissioner Brown.
I am not going to sit here today
you know what he said?
and try to testify.
Do you remember what he said at the deposition? He doesn't remember.
I recall exactly that he told you that the police commissioner, who was present at a press conference that day, said that he was not sure as of that afternoon.
Franklin, 1 second, please, if I may.
Sure.
You didn't commence your action, I'm told, until after Limerick Nelson's acquittal, until after he was said that he was innocent.
Not completely true.
Of the crime.
In November of 1991, 3 months after the events, we submitted affidavits to the state Supreme Court asking for the preservation of 9/11 tapes, which of course were not, some of which were not.
But the action wasn't commenced until he was acquitted, isn't that? That's correct.
That's correct, but that was not a direct reaction.
It's been reported that had he been convicted, that this lawsuit would have not been
That's
instituted.
incorrect. That's absolutely incorrect.
Okay, we have to go to a break now, but we'll certainly continue with this discussion. You're watching Lawline. I'm Alan Schnorman, your host. Stay with us.
After dating the guy forever, you think I could tell him anything. Why is this so hard? I'm really scared.
It takes a lot of guts to tell someone he's too drunk to drive. But you can do it. Just say it. Because if you don't, there may be nothing left to say.
Kevin, I'm gonna drive.
Take the keys, call a cab, take a stand. Friends don't let friends drive drunk.
When your employees train with the National Guard and Reserve, they learn to be better team players, better decision makers, and better leaders. It's training that makes them better at serving our country. And better when they come back to work for you.
Bill's back.
Be a hero. Give your employees the freedom to protect ours.
Hi, you're watching Lawline. Today we're talking about the Crown Heights lawsuit, what happened with the lawsuit, the deposition of the mayor. With us is the attorney for the plaintiffs, Franklin Snitow. We have the attorney for Mayor Dinkins, Thomas Bergdahl, from Corporation Counsel's office, and we're discussing what happened, where the lawsuit is going, and what happened to Crown Heights. Now, before the break, you were discussing the lawsuit and how it was instituted. I had said, of course, that it was instituted. It was reported because of the acquittal of the person who was accused of killing the young Mr. Rosenbaum. How do you feel about that whole trial?
To be very honest with you, it would be unfair of me to comment on a trial that I didn't attend. I know that there were problems in the way the police department handled this entire matter, including the Lemrick Nelson investigation. But I don't believe, especially since the U.S. Attorney and the Attorney General of the United States are considering that, I'm going to respond with regard to the treatment of that trial. I believe there were clear civil rights violations. I believe that Janet Reno has an obligation as a non-political Attorney General to prosecute.
Tom, it was reported that the jury in that particular case found the New York City police officers less than credible. How do you comment on that?
I obviously can't comment on having not spoken to them, Alan. I mean, I only know about this trial what I know from reading the papers, so I'm really not much of an expert witness on this. But what I know from reading the papers is it was reported that apparently a number of the jurors went out and had dinner, lunch, something with the defense attorney, if that happened.
That's, of course, after the acquittal.
It was after the acquittal.
Yes, of
if
course.
that happened, I frankly give very little credence to that jury, in my own personal opinion.
Well, I don't know. You're not saying, I don't know if that's proper or improper, but what I want to address basically is the reports of that. I believe there was 7, 8, or even 9 New York City police officers who testified in that case, and the jury finding that the police officers were less than credible, and this was almost like they were saying that they got together and made up a story.
Alan, it wasn't. It's clearly improper that a jury would go to a dinner, and there's a good reason for that. There's no doubt, although Lemrick Nelson didn't take the witness stand, there's no doubt that the defense conceded that he was part of the group that was involved in the stabbing of Yankel Rosenbaum. There's no question about that he was clearly part of that group. Anybody that would join a group like that, or a jury that would then go out to dinner with somebody who, in essence, the defense conceded was present and at least involved in that group, I'd have a hard time, as Tom would, in accepting the credibility of that
But wasn't
jury.
the evidence that they actually found the bloody knife on the possession of the defendant?
That's correct.
And then that blood matched the blood of the victim?
Yes, and he confessed. And he confessed.
And yet he was still found innocent of the crimes charged.
That's correct.
Now, what would you like the Attorney General of the United States to do in this particular matter?
I would like her, at this point, only to investigate. And there's a
Isn't that what she's doing now?
No.
What is she doing?
She's deciding whether to investigate. And there's a significant difference. You know, the lay public assumes that once an investigation is started, that somebody is guilty necessarily. I don't want them to believe that. I want, just in fairness, that the Attorney General take on the investigation into all aspects. The death of Yankel Rosenbaum, the handling of this matter, and the response by the City of New York to determine whether criminal, which is different than civil, but criminal violations have occurred. I think it's their responsibility.
Now, you're asking the City of New York for compensatory damages for the death of Yankel Rosenbaum, isn't that correct?
As well, that's correct. That's part of the case.
You're saying
for
basically
violations
because
of the civil rights.
the pain and suffering he sustained due to the
That's
knifing,
part, yes.
And I assume the loss of inheritance and for his family. I saw his brother on TV.
We're asking for damages under the civil rights laws, yes.
All those things.
Right.
Okay.
It sort of illustrates, Alan, how, in my opinion, the emotions of this case have outstripped the reason of it. Yankel Rosenbaum was murdered only a few hours after the start of the events on Monday night, August 19th, 1991. The police department was just then deploying their troops, and even by the plaintiff's allegations, there was absolutely no involvement of the mayor and police commissioner at that point, and there couldn't have been.
Tom,
Yet the plaintiffs are insisting somehow that the city is responsible for that murder. I don't think it washes.
Tom, may I ask you one question? Do you know if Limerick Nelson, not if, Limerick Nelson obviously has been held innocent by this particular jury.
Found not guilty.
Not guilty? All right. Is the New York City Police Department still investigating if Limerick Nelson didn't stab him? Certainly somebody else did. Is there a continuing investigation on who, if anyone, did the stabbing?
There has been a continuing investigation, and it's my understanding that that is continuing to date.
I see Franklin laughing.
Because a homicide case remains open, for the most part, for all time. Is there an active investigation?
Well, I know you're a former assistant district attorney.
In Manhattan, that's
Right.
correct. Is there an active investigation? Did they use surveillance, undercover surveillance? Even during the riots, during the violence, did they use undercovers? Nobody can tell me that. Did they use photographic surveillance? Nobody can tell me that. The police, the mayor refers to the disturbance at City Hall as a police riot. He refers to the pogrom as a disturbance. It's a difference in the way we treat things.
Well, what does a pogrom mean?
What does a pogrom mean? A pogrom means an assault on Jews because they are Jews. There is a second definition which says an assault on Jews because they're Jews with the government standing by. There's a double definition in
And
the
it's
text that I've
your
read.
opinion that there was a pogrom here.
I believe so.
And Tom?
Well, I mean, to the extent that there's any implication that there was state support for this activity or state condoning of the activity, absolutely, we reject that completely.
Alan, turn to the beginning of the Girgenti report where they show you the 9/11 tapes. The 9/11 tapes. One of the first phone calls that came in is from a woman crying that there's a pogrom going on in the streets. That term was not coined by the politicians. It wasn't coined by the lawyers. It was coined by the people who were calling 9/11 and getting no response. Again, Girgenti said the failure of the police to respond and the listening to the 9/11 tapes is absolutely blood-curdling.
Let's take this day by day, if I may. The riot started on what day, Tom?
Started on Monday night.
Monday night.
August 19th, 1991. There was an accident involving the death of Gavin Cato that happened about, what, was it 8:15 or was it 9:15?
8:20, I believe.
8:20.
Okay.
I will accept Frank's
And then what
timing
happened,
of
Franklin?
it.
The violence started immediately. Yelling, violence.
Well, there's different levels of violence.
People yelling. There were people in the escort car who were dragged out of the car, were beaten. Racial and ethnic statements about their being Jews. One of them required hospitalization, Mr. Lifsh, and all types of rumors. From that point on, the violence spread. Within 2 hours, Yankel Rosenbaum, or 3 hours, Yankel Rosenbaum was stabbed.
Well, was the level of violence that day the same as the next day, or was it different?
It kept increasing, and it kept.
Were you there?
No, I was not.
This is what you were told.
This is what the Girgenti report reports, and this is what the documentary evidence demonstrates.
It kept increasing?
Kept increasing.
Well, was Tuesday higher than Monday? Was
Yes.
Wednesday higher than Tuesday?
Absolutely.
Well, but let's be clear, Alan. We're not talking about a continuous period of violence. And again, that's the distinction I want to draw, not belittling any act of violence. But we're not talking about South Central Los Angeles where there's constant rioting going on. There were activities riotous activities that took place Monday night. The police
Were there
department put
50
in 400
people on the
cops,
street? Were
and
there
it was
100
stopped.
people on the street? I
You
mean,
know-
what are we talking about here?
Nobody stopped. No, wait a minute. Nobody stopped them. Do you know how many arrests were made the first night?
I think it was 9.
6.
Well,
report
Girgenti says
says
6.
the
Chief
report
Gallagher
says-
says
All right.
9.
The
I'm
report
not sure
says
And
it's
six.
the next day? What happened the next day?
What happened the next day?
The second day.
The next day, during the day, things were by and large calm. There was
Okay.
one march that led to a confrontation between the marchers, if you will, and Frank
Who was
doesn't
marching?
like that word.
Who was marching, Tom?
It was African Americans and Caribbean Americans marching to the 71st Precinct, where they demanded the arrest of the driver of the car, demanded that the police officers that supposedly roughed up Gavin Cato's father be disciplined.
And again, the
police
driver was the
department said
driver
no.
for one of the head
Police
rabbis, isn't that
department
correct?
rejected
Yes.
those requests.
Can I ask you a question? When you say there was a confrontation, what does that mean?
I mean that there was a group of people on this side of the street and a
Okay.
group of people
No,
on this side of the
rocks
street
were being
throwing
thrown.
rocks and bottles at each
Rocks
other.
were being thrown at a religious institution, 7070 Eastern Parkway, the Grand Rebbe's headquarters. Rocks were being thrown, anti-Semitic statements were being made, and people were standing in front of 770.
Frank,
That's not
Well-
a confrontation.
Well, with due respect, that's not
Give
the
me-
evidence.
give me an idea
The
of-
confrontation that I was describing took place
Yes.
at Kingston and President Street and was definitely
That's where
described by
770
all
is
reported
located.
as a confrontation. No, it's
Okay.
at Eastern Parkway.
Okay.
Give me the makeup of Crown Heights. What's the percentage of Jewish people? What's the percentage of Afro-Americans? What is it? What are we talking about
Jewish
here?
community is a very small minority within, I believe it's 17,000 was the number Girgenti finds.
It was something like that.
And what about
It was-
the Afro-American within that community of Crown Heights? Is it a little more? Is it 20,000? Is it?
It's by and large the rest. I'm not sure the absolute
200,
numbers.
I think it was something like
Oh.
200,000.
So in other words, the Jewish community is less than 20%.
Less than 20%. Absolutely.
And,
Absolutely.
or even perhaps more, closer to 10%.
That's correct.
Okay. What's the situation now? Has the situation calmed down? Are the streets back to normal, or is there still this tension in the community? Franklin?
I guess you'd have to be candid and admit that there are certain people who are looking for trouble at all times. I think that's a sad fact of life. We try to downplay that kind of problem, but there are problems in the street.
Franklin,
I mean, the mayor talked about when Nimmons was invading 770, statements.
Franklin, I know at one time the Hasidic community had their own, let's say, patrol. Do they still have that?
Yes, they do.
Okay. The time is up, but thank you very much, gentlemen, for appearing on Lawline. Certainly there was other topics we would have covered had we had the time. Tom,
and we would have been pleased to address them.
Tom Berglund from the Assistant Corporation Counsel, the attorney for the mayor, thank you, and Franklin Snitzow, the attorney for the plaintiffs, and Mr.
Good to see you.
Rosenbaum, thank you very much.
Good to
Well,
see you. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. And as always, this is Alan Schnorman, and thank you for watching Lawline.
You have been watching Lawline with your host, New York trial attorney Alan Schnorman. Mr. Schnorman will be back with you next week at the same time. If you have any questions about this week's program, please write to Lawline, 63 Wall Street, New York, New York, 10005, or call area code 212-432-9111. This program is made possible by the New York law firm of Zollman and Schnorman, who specialize in the field of personal injury law, located at 63 Wall Street in New York City.